Katerina was extremely nervous. She had to wear a loose, bulky dress, pin her hair up, and relax her body. To her, this was just another transaction. When the curtain was pulled back, several men were already waiting for her. The assistant, Tommaso, carried over a chair and told her to place her foot on it. He even reached up and touched her thigh. "Take your hand off me, thank you." Tommaso got slightly annoyed and told her to cooperate. Katerina had no choice but to obey, placing her hand on her forehead and posing as if she were gazing into the distance. Tommaso deliberately adjusted her hair as well. It turned out Katerina was modeling for an art class. The apprentices below began sketching. At that moment, Master Andrea walked in and announced that today they would be painting Diana, the goddess of the hunt. When he noticed a stain on her leg, he immediately ordered Tommaso to clean it. Tommaso obeyed right away. He spat on a cloth and used it to wipe Katerina's leg. She was speechless, knowing full well he was getting revenge on her. As the apprentices started drawing, Master Andrea emphasized that every detail, from head to toe, had to be captured perfectly. They had to create the most flawless goddess possible. Whoever ranked first this time would become his top apprentice. Leonardo, the main character, observed everything very carefully. He noticed the wound on Katerina's hand, then his eyes moved to the scar on her back. At that moment, Master Andrea cracked his whip and shouted at one of the students, "That chest looks like a sack of flour." He ordered him to start over. The unfinished drawing was taken away, and the apprentice had no choice but to begin again. The atmosphere in the studio was extremely tense. Katerina turned to look at Leonardo and realized he had been staring at her scar the whole time. After 2 hours, everyone had mostly finished and left, taking their drawings home for final adjustments. But when Katerina looked at Leonardo's work, she discovered he had not drawn her at all. Instead, he had drawn a monkey. She was instantly offended, feeling humiliated. Leonardo quickly explained that he meant no insult. Master Andrea had told them to paint the perfect goddess, but the scars on her hand and back did not fit that image, so he simply could not paint her that way. The next day was submission day. All the apprentices stood in a long line, waiting for Master Andrea to review their work one by one. The first student was criticized for making her look too fat, failed. The second was bluntly asked if he had painted his own mother because she looked far too old. "Even the monkeys at the zoo could paint better than you." He was immediately thrown out. Leonardo was incredibly nervous. At least the others had something to submit, but he was about to hand in blank paper. He had no idea what to do. The third student's work was judged as decent overall, balanced, pleasant to look at, and lively, but it lacked soul. It only captured the surface. Master Andrea told him to go home and think harder. Finally, it was Leonardo's turn. Tommaso snatched the drawings from his hands. When Master Andrea opened them, he found nothing but blank paper. The second sheet was blank too. He immediately exploded in anger, shouting that Leonardo must be mocking him by daring to submit empty pages. "You are making fun of me." Leonardo stammered, "I just can't feel it." Master Andrea snapped back angrily, telling him to go sleep under a water pipe. Maybe inspiration would hit him there. He ordered Leonardo to submit a proper drawing by tomorrow, or never come back again. At that moment, Katerina returned to the studio, hoping to continue modeling, only to be told she was no longer needed. They had found a new model who was more obedient, and more importantly, had no scars. Sure enough, a new woman had already replaced her, even exposing her chest for the artists to draw. Katerina had no choice but to leave quietly. Outside, she ran into Leonardo and accused him of telling everyone about the scar on her back, which had cost her the job. Leonardo quickly apologized and explained that he had never told anyone. He even offered to pay her double just for one more chance to paint her. Seeing how sincere he was, Katerina agreed and brought him back to her place. Leonardo hesitated for a moment, feeling that being alone with a woman like this was not exactly proper, but with his drawing deadline hanging over him, he had no choice but to follow her inside. After receiving the money, Katerina began posing. Leonardo gently introduced himself and asked for her name. Once Katerina introduced herself, he told her she only needed to sit on the chair and reveal her shoulder, because he wanted to create a painting with more realistic colors. In the middle of the night, Leonardo sneaked into the studio to steal Master Andrea's colored pigments, but he unexpectedly ran into Andrea himself. Left with no choice, Leonardo stepped forward and asked what was wrong. Andrea admitted he was facing an enormous problem. He had been assigned a major task, placing an 18-ton cross on top of the cathedral. If he succeeded, he would gain both wealth and great fame. But once he started calculating, he realized the task was far more complicated than he had imagined. The rounded body of the cross was simply too heavy. The pulley system could only lift part of it and could never bring it all the way to the cathedral roof, let alone rotate it into position. On top of that, the support structure for the pulleys could not handle such massive weight. If it was lifted too high, the entire system could collapse at any moment, destroying Andrea's lifelong reputation. He told Leonardo to go to bed, saying that if even he couldn't solve it, how could a young apprentice possibly do better? Leonardo blew out the candle and watched the white smoke rise into the air. Suddenly, an idea struck him. Smoke had no weight. If the body of the cross could somehow be handled like that, everything would change. Inspiration hit instantly. He quietly slipped into Andrea's room and began sketching his design on paper. He added 4 rotating wheels above, removed the lower axle, and placed an extra rope on the left side to control the angle and direction of movement. Leonardo worked through the entire night. The next morning, when Master Andrea saw the design, he was completely stunned. His hands trembled as he muttered to himself, "Impossible, why didn't I think of this?" True genius was undeniable. Without wasting time, Andrea immediately began preparing to carry out the plan. At last, the day arrived to place the cross on top of the cathedral. From nobles to common citizens, everyone gathered below to witness the event. The 18-ton cross slowly began to rise. 12 rotating wheels had been installed above to reduce the pulling force, allowing only 2 men to lift it. The cross was successfully raised to a height of 50 meters. Next came the most difficult part, changing its direction. Master Andrea was extremely tense because he had wagered his entire life on this moment. The apprentices quickly pulled the lever, and the cross began to shift. 10 meters, 8 meters, then only 5. Leonardo stood below, watching nervously. The movement had to be fast enough. If it took too long, the support structure would not hold. Slowly, the cross moved toward the top of the cathedral roof. Only 3 meters remained before it reached its final position. Everyone below watched in absolute tension. If the cross fell, people would die. Finally, it reached the cathedral roof. 3 men standing nearby used their shoulders to support it, and the cross was successfully placed in position. The crowd immediately burst into applause and cheers. They had done it. They had made history. Master Andrea's name would be recorded in the cathedral's history, but only he knew the truth. This success was not truly his achievement. Leonardo was naturally overjoyed as well, since the design had been his all along. But trouble came quickly. That same evening, when Leonardo returned to the studio, Master Andrea discovered that he had stolen the colored pigments. He gave Leonardo a chance to explain, but Leonardo said nothing about the design plans. He only admitted that he wanted to create the perfect painting. In the end, Andrea still decided to throw him out. The one who had betrayed him was none other than Tommaso. The next day, when Caterina heard that Leonardo had been expelled, she was furious. She immediately returned to the studio and demanded to know if they had any idea how talented he really was. She personally brought the portrait Leonardo had painted of her and showed it to Master Andrea. The moment he held it in his hands, he was completely stunned. The painting looked 99% identical to Caterina. Every line was delicate and alive, even beyond his own level of skill. He had never imagined that among his apprentices, there was a true genius like this. Master Andrea rushed outside to find Leonardo. At that moment, Leonardo was washing his face. As soon as he saw Andrea approaching, he quickly grabbed his shirt to wipe himself off. Andrea looked at him and asked directly if the design for lifting the cross had been his idea. "Yes, sir." Hearing that answer, Andrea nodded with satisfaction and said, "Come back with me. You will be my apprentice." Leonardo was overjoyed and immediately followed Master Andrea back to the studio. Not long after, Andrea received a second major commission, creating a work of art for the church. This time, he wanted to paint the little cherubs of Jesus and personally invited Leonardo to join him. But first, he decided to teach him the most important foundations of painting. The first lesson was about light. Master Andrea told Leonardo that light could be divided into 3 types. The first was direct light, like sunlight or the flame of a candle shining straight on an object. The second was diffused light, like placing cloth in front of a candle so the glow becomes softer, where light and shadow blend together. That, he said, was the true challenge for a painter. For the third type of light, Andrea took Leonardo outside to observe the real world. His entire life had been devoted to one pursuit, capturing the true beauty of the world right in front of his eyes. The second lesson was about color. Master Andrea mixed yellow and blue together, instantly creating olive green. He wanted Leonardo to understand that painting was not just about copying reality, but about feeling color and bringing it to life. The third lesson was practical painting. They went to the church, where Andrea had nearly finished the mural and intentionally left the most difficult part for Leonardo to complete. Staring at the angel figure, Leonardo hesitated for a long time and still could not bring himself to paint. He closed his eyes, trying to imagine what an angel should look like, but the only image that appeared in his mind was Caterina. In the end, Leonardo took a cloth, wiped away the original angel sketch, and began painting his own vision instead. He painted from morning until night, then continued through the night until the next morning. Leonardo carefully shaped every single brushstroke until the painting was finally complete. Only then did he realize that Master Andrea had been standing behind him for quite some time. Looking at the finished work, Andrea smiled with pride. It seemed Leonardo had truly grown into a real artist. On the day the painting was revealed, Leonardo attended a grand celebration with Master Andrea. The guests applauded and offered endless congratulations. Everyone admired the artwork, especially the angel section, which was praised as extraordinary. Even the Duke of Milan, Ludovico, could not stop complimenting Leonardo. He even offered him a position with double the salary and a private studio of his own. But Leonardo refused. He said he could not betray Master Andrea's trust. Ludovico coldly warned him that once he turned down this offer, there would never be a second chance. Even so, Leonardo stood firmly by his decision. Watching Leonardo being praised by everyone made Tommaso visibly furious. He had once believed he would become Master Andrea's top apprentice, but now that place had been taken by Leonardo. Last time, he had reported Leonardo just to get him thrown out, yet somehow Leonardo had returned and gained even more honor. Tommaso's jealousy only grew stronger. Not long after, Leonardo was approached by a male model who said he wanted to discuss painting and invited him back to his home, but the moment they arrived, Tommaso secretly sent a letter of accusation to the judge. Leonardo was immediately arrested and thrown into prison, accused of immoral behavior. Caterina quickly came to see him and secretly handed him some drawing paper. Written inside were the words, "Do not be afraid." With paper and pencils in hand, Leonardo became much calmer. He began drawing portraits for the people inside the prison. Fortunately, one of them was connected to a wealthy banking family. He greatly admired Leonardo's work and later helped secure his release, but when Leonardo returned, Master Andrea decided to expel him from the studio. He did not want his own reputation damaged by Leonardo's scandal. Even though he deeply respected Leonardo's talent, Andrea knew that if Leonardo stayed, he would lose future commissions and his entire career could collapse. No matter how much Leonardo begged, Andrea could not risk everything he had built. In the end, he had no choice but to send him away. Just when Leonardo had nowhere left to go, he received an invitation from a wealthy banking family to paint a portrait of their daughter, Ginevra, before her upcoming marriage. The family demanded a portrait that looked bright, joyful, and full of life, but Ginevra's face was filled with sadness, making the work extremely difficult for Leonardo. Caterina advised him to think more practically. He had already been expelled from the studio, and his reputation was nearly ruined. It had taken so much just to get this second chance, so why make life harder for himself? She told him he should simply paint what the family wanted. To thank Caterina for helping him, Leonardo helped her find a new job. The next day, the two of them went together to meet her new employer. Leonardo also began his own work painting Ginevra's portrait, but the job was far more difficult than he had expected. Ginevra showed no sign of happiness at all. There was never even the slightest smile on her face. No matter what Leonardo tried to say, she remained cold and emotionless, and after several days, he still could not paint her face, only managing to finish the background first. One day, Leonardo finally saw Ginevra smile. It turned out that her closest friend had come to visit. His name was Galeazzo, the trusted right-hand man of Duke Ludovico. The moment Galeazzo first saw Caterina, he was immediately drawn to her. As for Ginevra, she was so happy that she ran straight to greet him. Leonardo quietly observed everything and quickly realized that Galeazzo was the man Ginevra truly wanted to marry. A few days later, he finally completed the portrait. When Ginevra saw the portrait, she was so moved that she could not speak. In the end, Leonardo had chosen to follow his heart and paint her true self, a face filled with sadness, holding a leaf that symbolized Galeazzo's family. Only when she looked at that painting did Ginevra finally smile for real, but her family completely rejected it. Furious, they destroyed the portrait on the spot and declared that Leonardo would not be paid a single coin. Pushed into a corner, Leonardo had no choice but to beg his biological father for help. He was an illegitimate child, abandoned by his father since childhood and raised by his grandfather instead. After repeated pleading, his father finally agreed to open a small workshop for him and introduced him to his first client. A priest wanted him to recreate a sample painting in an exact 1:1 scale. Leonardo accepted the commission and called some of his former classmates to help, though he secretly added a bit of his own artistic touch to the work. A few days later, the priest returned to check the progress. Looking at the unfinished painting, he coldly said only one sentence, "This is the ugliest painting I have ever seen." Then he turned around and walked away immediately. Leonardo's first commission had completely failed. At that moment, his father finally showed his true face, bluntly telling him that his very birth had been a mistake and that he was nothing but useless. Leonardo stood there frozen, unable to say a single word. When he returned home, he found Caterina packing her belongings. It turned out she had finally found a place to belong. Galeazzo had fallen for her at first sight and wanted to take her with him to Milan. Leonardo forced himself to smile so she could leave without worry. He told her that his own work was going well, and that before long, he would also be going to Milan. Leonardo stayed behind alone to finish the remaining work. At that moment, Tommaso came to see him and confessed that everything that had happened before had been caused by him. He was the one responsible for getting Leonardo thrown into prison, but Leonardo had already known the truth. There was no one else cruel enough to do something like that. Filled with regret, Tommaso knelt down, apologized to Leonardo, and begged to become his apprentice. After that, the two of them traveled together to Milan. In that city, there were more soldiers than ordinary citizens, and art had almost no place to grow. But Leonardo had his own way of surviving. He began designing military weapons for the Milanese army. Even though he had once rejected Ludovico, this time he returned as an engineer. Leonardo brought his artillery designs to Ludovico, but the Duke did not even give him a chance to explain. He simply returned the sketches and coldly said he had no need for such defensive devices, but Leonardo refused to give up. He told Ludovico that what he truly lacked was not more weapons, but a masterpiece that would last forever. He insisted that he could create something beyond anyone's imagination and begged the Duke to give him one more chance. At that moment, people from a grand ball arrived to invite them. Leonardo had no interest in places like that, but he had to pretend otherwise. Unexpectedly, he ran into Caterina there again, and it was the happiest moment he had experienced in a long time. After some thought, Ludovico decided to assign Leonardo the task of creating a theatrical performance for the Duke's young nephew. Leonardo had no choice but to reluctantly accept. But things did not go smoothly at all. The lead actor of the play, Ronaldo, refused to cooperate. He believed Leonardo was far too inexperienced to direct him, and every word he spoke was filled with contempt. It was only after Ronaldo saw Leonardo's stage designs that he finally became genuinely interested in him. In the days that followed, Leonardo continued painting diligently, but producing the play became the first real failure of his career. It made him deeply anxious. Ronaldo noticed Leonardo was struggling, so he decided to let him experience what it felt like to fly through the air. At first, Leonardo was terrified, but little by little, he adapted, stretching out his arms and feeling true freedom. In that very moment, he finally understood what Ronaldo had meant. Art had to be a combination of reality and imagination. As he imagined himself as a bird spreading its wings across the sky, countless ideas suddenly flooded his mind. That same day, Leonardo accidentally saw the steward secretly meeting with a man wearing boots marked with a strange emblem. It was obvious they were plotting something. That night, Leonardo's pigments were mysteriously stolen. Tommaso quickly reported it to him, but Leonardo did not seem too concerned. Instead, he found himself captivated by the meal Ronaldo was preparing. That very moment would later become the inspiration for one of Leonardo's most famous masterpieces. Sometime later, Ludovico hosted a grand banquet. The steward secretly sprinkled poisoned pigment onto Ludovico's dog. It was a perfect plan, one move that could both assassinate Ludovico and frame Leonardo for the crime. Ludovico often stroked and played with the dog, so at first, no one noticed the danger. But not long after, while speaking with his guests, he suddenly began sweating heavily and struggling to breathe. Leonardo noticed the colored powder on Ludovico's hands and instantly realized he had been poisoned. Sure enough, Ludovico collapsed to the ground moments later. Leonardo immediately ordered the servants to bring the ingredients needed for an antidote. He quickly mixed them together and forced Ludovico to drink it, then called for a doctor to continue treatment. After that, all he could do was wait outside and hope it worked. While waiting, Caterina came to check on him. She worried that if the real culprit was not found, Leonardo would end up taking all the blame. Just as she was comforting him, Galeazzo happened to walk by and saw everything. Watching the woman he cared about standing so close to another man filled him with intense jealousy. After an entire night of treatment, Ludovico was finally out of danger and only needed rest to recover. Galeazzo took this chance to confront Leonardo directly in front of the Duke. He asked how a mere painter could possibly know how to make an antidote. Leonardo calmly explained that many pigments used by artists contained highly toxic substances. Because he had studied their ingredients in detail, he knew exactly how to respond. Ludovico thanked Leonardo and announced that the play would proceed as scheduled. Leonardo also realized Galeazzo was suspicious of him, so he decided to tell him everything he had seen. The steward had secretly met a man wearing boots marked with a lion emblem. That detail could be the most important clue of all. On the day of the performance, Galeazzo warned Caterina that she was no longer allowed to see Leonardo. If she disobeyed, she would be sent back to Florence. Caterina had no choice but to silently accept. Meanwhile, the play unfolded in spectacular fashion. Smoke filled the stage, artificial birds flew through the air, and the audience applauded non-stop in amazement. As night fell and candlelight filled the theater, the stage even featured a breathtaking fire performance. Then came the final act, and Ronaldo stepped onto the stage. In that instant, Leonardo suddenly recognized the lion emblem boots he had seen before. They belonged to Ronaldo. He was just about to rush forward when Galeazzo acted first, killing Ronaldo on the spot. What was most terrifying was Ludovico's calm reaction, as if everything had been planned by him from the very beginning. Ludovico coldly announced before everyone that this was the fate of all traitors. He had already discovered that Ronaldo and the steward were plotting to assassinate him and seize power, so he turned their plan against them, using the play itself as a public display of his absolute authority. After the performance, Ludovico gave Leonardo a new commission, to design a massive equestrian statue in honor of his late father. Leonardo called on his old classmates to help him, but this commission quickly became one of the greatest challenges of his life. There were already too many magnificent equestrian statues in the world, and creating something truly different, a masterpiece powerful enough to survive through time, was far from easy. Leonardo had no choice but to begin by studying real horses. He went to the stables, standing as close as possible to observe every movement, placing his hand on the horse's body to feel its muscles and physical structure. Just then, the sky suddenly darkened, and a bolt of lightning struck nearby. The horse was startled, rearing up on its hind legs with a loud neigh. That exact moment gave Leonardo his inspiration. He rushed back to the workshop, quickly sketching the image of the horse from memory, while making a bold decision. The sculpture would not be carved from stone, but built with clay and wood first, then cast in bronze on the outside, creating something truly one of a kind. Everyone immediately got to work. They used steel rods to build the horse's frame, then layered clay over it little by little, shaping realistic details. Leonardo kept touching the body of the sculpture, then stepping back to study its overall form, but he still was not satisfied. He remembered that powerful moment when the horse had reared up and neighed. If he truly wanted to capture its strength and majesty, the horse had to be shown rising on its hind legs, but doing that meant all the weight would shift to the back legs, making the entire structure unstable. Leonardo decided to place an enemy figure beneath the horse's front legs, that way the front legs could rest on it, solving the balance problem while keeping the dramatic pose intact. Tommaso reminded him that they had already spent a huge amount of time on this sculpture, and the final piece had to be delivered that very week. Starting over now would almost certainly mean failure, but Leonardo refused to accept that excuse. He ordered everyone to work through the entire night until it was done. While Leonardo buried himself in work, Caterina was facing troubles of her own. Galeazzo had seen her secretly meeting Leonardo, and that look in her eyes could not fool anyone. He knew her feelings had never truly disappeared. Galeazzo quietly walked away, leaving Caterina alone with no one left to rely on. Fortunately, Ludovico's wife was very fond of her and allowed her to stay, but the bigger problem was that Duke Ludovico himself had become interested in Caterina's beauty. Lady Ludovico told her that the Duke would be having dinner with her that evening, just the two of them. She even gave Caterina a new formal dress to wear. Ludovico's intentions were painfully obvious, and even his wife could do nothing but accept it. She knew that only by keeping her husband satisfied could her own life remain peaceful. Caterina had no idea what to do, so she immediately went to Leonardo for advice, but Leonardo had no room in his mind for anything except the sculpture. All he cared about was finishing it. The two argued fiercely. In the end, Caterina chose to surrender. Women were used to living in darkness and judgment, and a single word from a man could destroy their entire lives. In that world, what choice did they really have except sacrificing themselves? Leonardo continued pouring all his energy into the sculpture. He invited a model named Marco to help him. Marco loved art deeply, so Leonardo kept him by his side as an assistant. With the entire team working together, the sculpture was finally completed. Ludovico personally came to inspect it, walking around it carefully and studying every detail, but instead of satisfaction, he became furious. He said he had asked for a great monument, not this ridiculous little thing. He was taller than the sculpture himself. After saying that, Ludovico stormed off in anger. Leonardo quickly explained that this was only the model, and the real statue would be 8 times larger. Everyone around him was stunned because no one had known that before. Seeing Ludovico still hesitating, Leonardo immediately asked him to lie down and look up from below. From that angle, Ludovico was amazed. The horse suddenly looked enormous and majestic. He was instantly convinced and decided to fully support Leonardo in completing the masterpiece. But only a month later, Leonardo discovered a major problem. If the statue was enlarged 8 times, even the smallest flaws would be magnified with it. He could not accept the idea of his masterpiece containing even the slightest imperfection. Marco took him to a butcher's shop, where Leonardo could study the internal anatomy of a horse in the most realistic way possible. He immediately began sketching every anatomical detail, then returned to continue refining his work. Just as Leonardo was about to complete the great horse statue, a major disaster struck. The French army attacked the borders of Milan, and Ludovico immediately ordered all the bronze meant for the sculpture to be taken back and turned into weapons for war. Watching years of passion and hard work destroyed before his eyes, Leonardo was devastated and rushed to confront Ludovico. But at that exact moment, Ludovico's wife had just died during childbirth, and the entire palace was drowning in grief. Leonardo suddenly burst into the memorial ceremony, causing Ludovico to explode in anger and shout directly at him, "You dare interrupt my mourning ceremony." Ludovico decided to completely abandon the statue project. He said he would honor his late wife in another way. Instead of the monument, he gave Leonardo a new commission to paint a mural for the church. That mural would later become the famous masterpiece known as The Last Supper. Meanwhile, Caterina began paying attention to Ludovico's young nephew. Because he was still underage, the boy was kept locked inside the palace almost every day, living in loneliness and under constant control. Seeing how lonely the boy was, Caterina took the initiative to talk to him. That was when she learned that Ludovico was only ruling Milan temporarily on behalf of his nephew. Once the boy came of age, he would become the true ruler of the city. One day, when Caterina was about to drink a glass of wine, Galeazzo suddenly stopped her. He said he would pour her a fresh one, but deliberately spilled the original wine onto the floor. In that moment, Caterina sensed something was very wrong. It was clear they did not want her drinking that glass. And that very afternoon, something terrible happened. While Ludovico's nephew was studying painting, he suddenly collapsed on the spot. Leonardo instantly realized the boy had been poisoned. Caterina also shared her suspicion. They had definitely done something to him. That night, Leonardo tried to visit the boy and continued teaching him, but he was stopped by the servants. They said that without Ludovico's permission, no one was allowed near him. Leonardo secretly sneaked into the neighboring room and personally saw the doctor putting medicine into the boy's water. As soon as the doctor left, Leonardo rushed inside, picked the boy up, and tried to escape. But by then, the child was no longer breathing. Leonardo panicked and shouted desperately for help. By the time the doctor returned, it was already too late. The boy was dead. When Caterina learned the truth, she felt chills run down her spine. This palace was far more terrifying than she had imagined. For the sake of power, Ludovico was willing to kill even his own blood relatives, first Ronaldo, and now his own nephew. Perhaps they would be next. Caterina wanted to leave this place with Leonardo as soon as possible, but he refused. Leonardo did not want to start over from nothing again, only here had he finally earned Ludovico's recognition, and most importantly, the mural was still unfinished. If he left now, all his years of effort would be wasted, and perhaps he would never become the artist he dreamed of being. Hearing those words, Caterina stood there speechless. In the end, Caterina quietly left the palace and returned to Florence to search for a new life. At that time, she was already pregnant. Meanwhile, Leonardo poured everything he had into his masterpiece. He walked through the streets, studying every face and every human gesture, using real people as inspiration for his painting. He also abandoned the traditional mural technique and created a new method instead, mixing pigments with egg yolks so the colors would bind more strongly, preventing peeling and reducing cracks on the wall. Leonardo marked a single point on the wall, the vanishing point of the perspective. From that exact position, the room and the painting would merge into one, making the viewer feel as if they were sitting there, sharing dinner with Jesus himself. To create the mural, the first step was breaking down the entire composition and drawing each figure separately. The second step was using nails to punch tiny holes around the outlines. The third was fixing the sketch onto the wall. Finally, pigment was brushed over it, connecting the dotted lines together. Slowly, every shape began to appear, and the masterpiece started to take form. Leonardo explained the true meaning behind this painting. During the Last Supper, Jesus told his disciples, "One of you will betray me." What Leonardo wanted to emphasize most was not just the image of Jesus himself, but the expressions of the 7 disciples when they heard those words, the shock, the doubt, the fear, and the very human reactions that followed. Everyone worked together to complete the mural. For this masterpiece, Leonardo spent countless sleepless nights. Even the smallest flaw was enough to drive him mad. Every time he finished a section, he would take a candle and move in close to inspect every detail, making sure everything was as perfect as possible. But he still discovered a serious problem. If the people in the painting were to stand up, their heads would hit the ceiling. The room's ceiling was too low. The workers laughed and told him it was only a painting. Those people would never stand up, and no one would ever think about something like that. But Leonardo would never allow even the smallest imperfection to exist in his work. He ignored every warning from the workers and stubbornly decided to start over from the beginning. With no other choice, everyone had to follow him. Some were responsible for mixing pigments, others handled the background, while some focused on the fine details. Everything had to begin again, all because of Leonardo's obsession with perfection. After a long period of hard work, the mural was finally close to completion, but at that exact moment, tragedy struck again. The French army attacked Milan and killed one of Leonardo's workers. This was not just an attack, it was a clear warning: anyone who supported Ludovico would die. Tommaso begged Leonardo to stop. Their lives were being threatened, and continuing would only make things worse, but Leonardo stubbornly refused to give up and insisted on finishing the masterpiece no matter the cost. Furious, Tommaso walked away. 2 months later, the mural was finally completed, but the French army also officially entered the city. They destroyed the great horse statue Leonardo had once poured his soul into and declared that Ludovico's era was over. Having lost everything, Leonardo was left completely directionless and returned to Florence. One day, someone asked Leonardo to paint a portrait. At first, he intended to refuse, but the moment he lifted the woman's veil, her eyes and that mysterious half-smile on her lips instantly captivated him. That woman would later become the famous Mona Lisa. Leonardo sat there staring at her for a long time, unable to paint a single stroke. Her daughter had just passed away, and she was still dressed in mourning clothes, yet the corners of her lips seemed to hold a faint smile. To create a truly perfect portrait, he needed to see the real person inside the subject, but this time, Leonardo could not see her soul. Mona Lisa gently told him that perhaps what was missing in Leonardo's own heart was love. Maybe that was why he could no longer reach the soul of another person. At that moment, a messenger from Imola arrived before the mayor of Florence and offered 2 choices: either pay 30,000 gold coins as protection money, or send Leonardo to the palace of Duke Cesare as his designer. Since Leonardo was already trapped in a dead end, he decided to accept and go to Imola. Duke Cesare of Imola took Leonardo outside and pointed to the city's water supply system beyond the walls. All of the city's water came from outside the fortress. If enemies attacked, they would lose their entire lifeline. That was why Leonardo's first task was to redesign the water system and protect the city. Leonardo studied the site carefully and felt that water was like human emotion, sometimes violent, sometimes unstable, and often impossible to control. He decided to use the power of water itself to reshape it. He ordered a new canal to be dug beside the river, built a dam, redirected the water to flow beneath the city walls, and added a support system to control the current. Cesare was astonished that Leonardo had come up with such an effective solution so quickly. But the second mission was far more difficult, rebuilding the entire city wall and strengthening its defenses. First, Leonardo needed to study the full geography of the city from above, but there were no towers high enough to give him that view. While struggling for a solution, he looked up at the sky and watched birds flying overhead. If humans could fly like them, surveying the entire city would become so much easier. Without hesitation, Leonardo built an entirely new kind of measuring cart. As the cart moved forward, small balls inside would drop one by one. By counting how many balls fell, he could calculate the exact length of the road traveled. Together with Marco, Leonardo walked through every alley and every hidden street in the city, leaving no road unexplored. In the end, he completed a full map of the entire city. When Cesare saw it, he was stunned. It was the first time he had ever seen his entire city laid out before him on paper. Combined with Leonardo's defensive systems, the city had become nearly impossible to destroy. In the middle of the night, Leonardo was suddenly threatened by an assassin and forced to go see Cesare, but the moment the assassin moved, Cesare noticed him through the shadow cast on the wall and killed him instantly. Witnessing that scene left Leonardo terrified. All he wanted was to create his masterpieces. He had no desire to be dragged into bloody political struggles and power games, so he immediately begged Cesare to let him leave, but the Duke refused completely. After repeated pleading, Cesare finally gave him one condition: if Leonardo could design a weapon capable of killing 100 enemies at once, he would grant him freedom. Leonardo stayed awake all night. He understood very clearly that once such a deadly weapon existed, it would only bring more war and destruction. He simply wanted to go home, not become someone who helped create mass death, but he also knew he had no other choice. The next day, Cesare summoned Leonardo and forced him to witness an execution with his own eyes. Leonardo could not understand why the prisoner being executed was one of Caesar's most loyal soldiers. Why kill a man who had served him faithfully? Cesare coldly replied that he wanted everyone to fear the very name Cesare. Only fear, he believed, could make people truly submit. When the executioner raised his blade and brought it down, ending the soldier's life, Leonardo became even more determined to escape this place at any cost. He immediately wrote to Caterina, telling her everything about the danger he was trapped in. After receiving the letter, Caterina walked through heavy rain to find Leonardo's father and begged him on her knees to save his son. No matter how cold their father-son relationship had always been, blood was still blood. Leonardo's father said very little, only telling her to go home first. The next day, Caterina went to beg the mayor of Florence for help as well. When she saw Leonardo's father walking inside, she immediately understood that he had been quietly trying to save his son all along. As for Leonardo, he finally designed a massive siege machine, 25 meters long, with 6 rotating wheels, capable of launching stones and explosives. Even if it was never placed on a battlefield and simply stood hidden in a corner, it was enough to terrify anyone who saw it. Cesare was highly satisfied and decided to keep his promise, granting Leonardo his freedom. Along with the design itself, Leonardo's father also brought Cesare an entire chest of gold to make sure his son would be released safely. At last, Leonardo returned to Florence, but even after coming back, he still could not finish the portrait of Mona Lisa. Around that same time, another artistic genius rose into fame, Michelangelo. His statue of David was placed in the very center of the city. Everyone was amazed by the powerful 5-meter-tall sculpture, but Leonardo hated it completely. He did not even attend the unveiling ceremony. In his eyes, it was nothing more than the trash of idealism, a work of art that failed to speak the truth of human nature. Caterina advised Leonardo not to trap himself inside the obsession of an unfinished masterpiece. She told him he needed to go outside more, because perhaps seeing the world from a different angle would change the way he thought. At that very moment, the mayor of Florence invited Leonardo to create a massive mural about war. Looking at the enormous wall before him, Leonardo decided he would create a masterpiece unlike anything ever seen before. But there was one condition: he had to finish it before the city's victory anniversary, meaning time was extremely limited. Leonardo immediately sent Marco to buy all the necessary materials. During that time, Marco accidentally saw Caterina secretly meeting another man, but he had no time to think about it right now. The work came first. Once the scaffolding was finished, Leonardo climbed up to inspect the wall and discovered that the surface was far too soft. If he painted directly on it, the colors would peel off immediately. He had no choice but to completely rebuild the wall's foundation first. He coated the wall with a special mixture containing beeswax before painting. As expected, the colors held much better and no longer peeled away easily. During the day, Leonardo focused on preparing the wall. At night, while the surface slowly dried, he sat alone sketching the design. Standing before the enormous wall, he imagined the completed masterpiece slowly taking shape inside his mind. At the same time, Michelangelo heard that Leonardo was creating a massive mural. The next day, the mayor personally brought Michelangelo into the room where Leonardo was working and announced that he wanted Michelangelo to paint another mural on the opposite wall. Leonardo immediately objected. He believed the noise and the presence of another artist would ruin his entire creative process, but the mayor was thrilled by the idea. In his eyes, having the two greatest artistic geniuses of the age competing in the same room would become the greatest glory Florence could ever claim. No matter who created the better masterpiece, the true winner would be the city itself. The moment Michelangelo arrived, he brought nothing but provocation. He deliberately hung up a painting of a bud on the wall, making everyone around burst into laughter. It was clearly a direct challenge aimed at Leonardo. That night, while Leonardo stood alone staring at his mural, his father suddenly appeared. The two of them had barely seen each other for decades. This time, instead of criticizing him, his father praised Leonardo's talent for the very first time. Leonardo had waited his entire life to hear those words. He could not hold back his tears. Since the age of 5, he had been abandoned by his father and had never once received real love from him. "You gave birth to me, but you never loved me." Hearing that, his father had no words to answer, and could only turn around and walk away in silence. A few days later, Leonardo learned that his father had passed away. A man who had grown up without love had spent his entire life searching for it, but sadly, by the time Leonardo finally gained fame and recognition, his father was already gone. He returned to the church, stood silently before his own work, and for the first time admitted Michelangelo's talent. Leonardo confessed that he had accepted this commission from the beginning only because he wanted to prove to everyone that he was the greatest artist of all. Michelangelo simply smiled. He said that when he was young, Leonardo had been his idol, the person he admired most and always wanted to become. But when he learned that the very man he worshipped did not respect his work, Michelangelo deliberately chose to paint on the opposite wall. He wanted everyone to witness it and judge Leonardo with their own eyes. Leonardo quietly took down all of his sketches. None of it meant anything to him anymore. Michelangelo warned that if he left now, people would simply think he could not accept defeat and had chosen to run away. But Leonardo no longer cared about people's judgment. The next day, he went to the mayor to withdraw from the project, only to discover that Michelangelo had already left as well. And just like that, the rivalry between the two artistic geniuses came to an end. Leonardo poured all of his heart into finishing the Mona Lisa. Around that time, Marco told him that after leaving Milan, Caterina had given birth to a baby boy and left him with a wealthy banking family. Leonardo did not want that child to grow up the way he had, abandoned and unloved, so he decided to bring the boy home and raise him himself. At that moment, Galeazzo appeared. He wanted to use Leonardo to convince the mayor to help Ludovico regain power. Just then, Caterina's son came downstairs after hearing the noise. When Galeazzo realized the boy was already 10 years old, a dangerous thought crossed his mind. He returned and reported to Ludovico that this might actually be his illegitimate son. Leonardo refused to help and openly admitted that Ludovico might truly have an illegitimate child. Ludovico immediately realized that if the French discovered this, they would certainly take the boy hostage, and he would never regain power. So he decided to act first and ordered Galeazzo to capture the child and bring him back. In the middle of the night, Leonardo heard noises outside and immediately told the boy to hide. Soldiers stormed in under the excuse that they were investigating a child kidnapping. Without asking Leonardo's permission, they turned the entire house upside down, rushed upstairs, and searched every corner. Seeing Caterina's nervous expression, one of the soldiers violently pulled back the curtain and threw everything hidden behind it onto the floor. The boy was curled up in a corner, quickly blowing out the candle beside him. Luckily, the soldiers found nothing and eventually left. Only after they were gone did the boy dare to come out, but Leonardo knew that hiding forever was not a solution. He decided to temporarily send the child to stay with the priest for safety. At the same time, he burned every painting connected to Caterina. He had once been the one who caused her suffering, and he had stood there watching her die without saving her. Galeazzo had seen everything with his own eyes. Soon after, Leonardo was arrested for murder, and all the evidence pointed directly at him. Today was the day of Leonardo's execution. From beginning to end, he offered no explanation and no defense for himself. He simply stood there in silence as they placed the rope around his neck. But at that exact moment, the judge in charge of the case suddenly arrived and announced that the letter in his hand could prove Leonardo's innocence. The letter clearly stated that Galeazzo had acted under Ludovico's orders to murder his own nephew. Worse still, to stop Caterina from revealing the truth, Galeazzo had also killed her. Afraid that everything would be exposed, Galeazzo immediately attacked the guards and fled, but the truth was that the letter contained no actual details at all. The judge had uncovered the full truth through his own investigation. Everything Leonardo had done was to protect the child. For the boy to remain safe, Caterina had to disappear from the world, so no one would ever be able to trace him. That was why Leonardo burned every painting connected to Caterina, to make outsiders believe there had been conflict between them that ended in murder. In reality, Leonardo had poisoned Caterina, but the moment Galeazzo left, he immediately gave her the antidote and used another corpse to replace her body. Everything had gone according to plan until Leonardo discovered that one painting had gone missing. To keep the truth hidden, he had to return and find it, which was why he was arrested. In the end, the judge realized he had been so obsessed with finding a reason why Leonardo would kill Caterina that he had ignored the obvious truth right in front of him. Leonardo had never killed anyone at all. Eventually, Caterina left with her son, while Leonardo spent the rest of his life completing his greatest masterpiece, Mona Lisa. And that is the full story of Leonardo. This episode's question is, in your opinion, between Leonardo and Michelangelo, who is more famous? If you choose Leonardo, comment number 1. If you choose Michelangelo, comment number 2. Thank you so much for watching, goodbye, and see you in the next recap.